Hi, everyone.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. I guess in Germany, well, it's still afternoon. Someone said they're calling in from Germany. Welcome. We were just giving a few minutes to let folks join. Excuse me. I'm Monica Navarro. I'm the Senior Director of Artist Programs here at Firelight Media.
Hi, I'm Chloe Walters Wallace. I'm Manager of Artist Programs at Firelight Media. Welcome, everyone.
Well, and behind the scenes, we have Jimena Mezcua Cuenca, who is managing the chat and the questions, but she was the mastermind behind all of this happening today. So thank you, Jimena. Before we get started, I would want to take a minute to do a land acknowledgement. I am here in Brooklyn, which is the land of the Lenape in Canarsie. Jimena just helpfully posted a land acknowledgement map if you want to see where you are and share with folks. And we do that in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of what is now the United States of America. And also in this moment when folks in indigenous communities are still fighting COVID at alarming rates. So please share where you're calling in from, dialing in from, and we'll get started. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is an overview of the Doc Lab program. Pretty thorough overview. Hopefully you've looked at the website and are familiar with some of these requirements, but we'll give a little bit more color and context on them. We'll be talking about the requirements to apply. We'll tell you what projects we're looking for. And we'll also kind of go in deeper on some of the sections and where we hope you will pay attention and be thoughtful in your application so that we get a good understanding of you and your project. And lastly, we'll have a live Q&A at the end. Please put your questions in the Q&A box. Feel free to engage with each other and with Jimena and Chloe in the chat, but put your questions in the Q&A box. It will be the simplest way for us to be able to answer them. Some we will answer live, some that are simple we will answer directly. And yeah, I'm gonna now pass it to Chloe, who is, oh no, before I pass it to Chloe, sorry. It's the first time I'm driving a PowerPoint on Zoom. Before I pass it to Chloe, I want to talk to you a little bit about the origin story of Firelight's Doc Lab and how it all started. So Firelight is actually celebrating 20 years this year, Firelight Films, which Stanley Nelson and Marcia Smith co-founded. And so it's been a big year for us as we've expanded many of our incredible programs, but this is the flagship program of what is Firelight Media. This is actually the 11th year of the lab. And it literally started because filmmakers were knocking on Stanley and Marcia's front door. They still actually do have the basement of their brownstone in Harlem is an office, although the majority of us, when we did work in the office, worked around the corner. And folks were knocking on their door, notably Byron Hurt, the director of Beyond Beats and Rhymes and Soul Food Junkies, would show up to get support and mentorship. And they basically formalized that into a program to really support the next generation of filmmakers of color. So Byron, and so if you go to the website and see, you know, the luminaries that have gone through this program, it's a really incredible group of people who've won every conceivable award and have developed some really strong projects. And it's always been centered on community and who's telling the story and just really continuing to nurture. And it's really amazing as the newest member of Firelight to be part of that legacy, and you know, looking who is that next generation that we will be supporting that's part of the Firelight family. So that's how it started. I'm gonna, and again, remember to put your questions in the Q&A box, which we will get to at the end, but I'm gonna now pass it to my colleague Chloe, who's gonna explain who is eligible for this incredible program.
Hello, everyone. Again, we're really excited to have you with us, and we're excited to meet the next documentary lab 5, 6, 7.0 through this format. To start, we're going to talk about where filmmakers can be based. Again, if there's nothing else you remember from this webinar, remember that you must be a filmmaker of color working on your first or second feature, and you should be from a racially and ethnically underrepresented community based in the United States, Puerto Rico, and other US territories. We are really excited about the other US territories and specifically being geographically diverse. So please, wherever you are based throughout the country or Puerto Rico or the territories, we are excited to see your application. Again, the project must be a long-form feature-length documentary. Unfortunately, we don't accept shorts or series or any fiction projects. We're specifically focused on anything over an hour, 20 minutes, or an hour for broadcast. The film must be a work in progress and in production or post-production. We don't accept films in pre-production or completed films. So if you are going to be in production, you can be in early production. So you have shot 10 minutes or up to 30 minutes for your sample reel, which we'll be talking about later. You should have secured characters and have a fair understanding of what your film is going to be about. A lot of people ask, how late in post-production can we work with you? We still want to be able to have input, give notes, and help shape your project and allow the industry that you'll be introduced through the program to be able to do so as well. So again, emerging documentary filmmaker working on your first or second feature-length documentary. If all the films you've done before have been co-directed and this is the first film that you're helming and driving yourself, we consider that your first feature length. Obviously, that depends on the body of work you have created. So if this is the case, you should reach out to us and we can give you some more advice. Unfortunately, we do not accept student films or filmmakers that are in school. If you are interested in connecting with Firelight, you should try to connect with us through our groundwork program if you are a student or in school. Only the director of the film is eligible to apply. We can accept co-directors, but they must meet all of these other eligibility requirements, and it has to be indicated on your application. And give us a full description of who your co-director is, what their experience is, what your roles will be on the project, everything. And we accept POC filmmakers based in the US, regardless of their citizenship status. Unfortunately, we do not accept filmmakers based internationally. Please let me know if you have any further questions about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chloe. Oh, I think did I jump? No, I didn't jump. These are the types of, I think there was a section I was looking for, but sorry, something is missing. We are missing a section. I apologize. Maybe before we go to that, we can jump into what kinds of films we're looking for. So Chloe, why don't you take us through these first two?
Sure. These two films are very different in nature. The first film is directed by a current Firelight Fellow named Raul Paz Pastrana. It's an observational film, really connected to anthropological observational look of the migrant trail throughout Central America. Raul really follows three different groups, including an anthropologist that's studying the migrant trail. And it's, again, highly observational. It premiered at Margaret Mead. This is the lane that this film falls into. And I think it's really important that we say at the top that we're interested in all types of films. We really pride ourselves at looking at from experimental to investigative to this observational work. We really are looking at the depth and breadth of everything that POC filmmakers have to offer. I'll move to Jadoland, directed by Nadia Shihab. It recently won an Independent Spirit Award last year. Nadia documented, it's a personal and experimental film about her family in Texas, in a very small town in Texas. She's Iranian, and looking at, memory, loss, inherited trauma, displacement, and doing that all through working with her mother, who is an artist as well, and her family. I'll move next. Monica will take the next one.
I'm sorry, I forgot screen share. You all saw that I checked out the Q&A box. Sea Drift. So this is a good example of a historical film that we would look for. Sea Drift actually premiered last year at Slamdance in 2019 and had an incredible festival run, and just had its broadcast last month on Real South, which is a regional public media strand that premieres throughout the southern United States, but also distributes nationally on World Channel. So I encourage you to look for it. But this film really looks at this unknown chapter in US history of a fatal shooting in a coastal town on the Gulf Coast in 1979, and how it pitted the Vietnamese refugee community against this small Anglo town, and how this hostilities against refugees, war, racism still reverberates today, which I think isn't a surprise as we see these convulsions happening across cities and streets in the country. But it's a really nuanced and profound film. And Tim was actually quite far along in the film, but was able to get feedback on the sort of final cuts and get support through the rollout. So this would be a good example that even though he wasn't finished, he was near the end, but really needed critical feedback to make sure he had a sort of nuanced portrait, and then got a lot of support and mentorship in the rollout of his film. Lastly, sorry, there's not a proper poster yet, but this is the key image to Down a Dark Stairwell by Ursula Liang. And this actually premiered at the last film festival, True False, in 2020, in-person film festival. And it will have a broadcast next year on Independent Lens. And it's continuing to make an online festival run. So do see if it's coming to a festival near you. Perhaps some of you got to see it in the Human Rights Watch Festival last week. But this film is kind of a good example of an investigative film that we would take that looked at a Chinese American police officer who killed Akai Gurley in a housing project, and the bullet that dislodged kind of set off a chain of events calling for justice, looking at systemic racism. It was the first time in a generation that there was not only protests for Asian Americans in New York City, but actually throughout the country. And so it's a very in-depth look at all of these issues, and also the first time that an NYPD officer was convicted in a decade, and the fact that it was not a white officer that was convicted for the first time. Obviously still has a lot of resonance in everything that's happening today, so worth looking at, because it really takes a hard look at these various communities and how they get pitted against each other, and the inequities that exist amongst these groups. So I think you can kind of see in all of these examples that what would be on its face like a border story, a personal story, a historical, an investigative, they all go very in depth. And because it's an 18-month fellowship, the support you get from the team and from your mentor and through the peer support of the cohort is for you to be able to tackle those subjects and interrogate them and interrogate your own perspective. Many of the filmmakers are from the community, some are not, whereas Tim is Asian American, he's not Vietnamese American, so he was very sensitive for how he was portraying this community. Similarly with Ursula, she was holding the experience of Chinese American community, broader Asian American community, and the Black community in Down a Dark Stairwell. So we want complex. We do not shy away from complex. Sorry. So this is just a PSA, helpful reminder to use the Q&A box. I see some questions are already popping up in there, some of which will get answered as we keep going through, and the rest we will answer live at the end and engage with each other in the chat. And these are just some pictures of our lovely filmmakers in the field, presenting their work. This was actually at this black and white picture was at Getting Real in 2018 with our impact producers and our directing fellows. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a few sections we want you to pay attention to in your application. I will note that we do use the .core application, and we truly use it. It's not the .core with like a different length than what is prescribed there. So if you've got a strong .core application, you're already ahead of the game, but there are a couple sections you might want to pay attention to sort of make sure it's in line with Firelight's mission and work. And want to acknowledge our good colleagues at IDA and Sundance and other partners that helped develop that application to simplify the process for filmmakers. So make sure to list all the funding you received to date and how much you've raised. This is important for us to know as we will be supporting you over these 18 months, in strategizing about your funding. We also want to know any pending funds, so anyone you've applied to. So that would be the ones under consideration. You've actually applied and you're awaiting notification. And we also want to see a breakdown of your project's expenses from development through completion and release of the film. So helps us, whereas, you can look at the proposals like the plan in terms of like the visual and the language you're going to use to tell the story and maybe why this story needs to be told. The budget says a lot about how you actually intend to execute this project. And we like to see how you're already thinking about budget and what support you've gotten to date. And I know that a question came up about sample and the rough cut. So we asked for a minimum of 10 minutes and a max of 30 minutes, whether that's a sample, a demo, a selection of clips, or a rough cut. We also want to make sure you include a description of your sample. We want to know how this represents the project, what's absent, what we should be looking for, us and the other reviewers, which are both internal and alumni and other partners of Firelight. And lastly, I would say that if you are submitting a rough cut, please indicate where we should start watching. If you don't indicate, say, start at minute 25 or start at minute 30, we will assume you want us to watch the first 30 minutes. And you should assume that we will not watch more than 30 minutes just because of bandwidth and capacity. So pick your strongest 30 minutes if it is a longer sample or rough cut you're showing, and indicate where you want us to start. Otherwise, the first 30 is what we are going to evaluate.
Can I jump in really quickly,
please,
Monica, to add something? For these samples, what we have been recommending, but obviously everyone comes at their sample in a different way, and so we encourage you to decide what that will look like. If you have the capacity, we recommend to have a trailer, a very short trailer at the beginning, and then to select a couple scenes that really get to the heart of your film, whether that is to show a moment of conflict that speaks to a larger theme, whether that's diving into one of the characters in your film, or whether that's really showing the crux of the situation. That's the advice that I would give. Do you want to add anything to that, Monica?
No, just that it is good to sort of balance a trailer with those scenes, because I see a trailer as kind of being like a strong thesis statement, but it doesn't tell us how you can cut a scene, or it may not really get into character. So, and that's where in your kind of narrative of what we're looking at, you can kind of show us how you're going deeper in some of those scenes.
Exactly.
Thank you for that, Chloe. Always a question of what to submit, and there are so many varieties of material you could show. Oops, was that lastly, we've added a question about COVID-19 and want you to give us some input on how the pandemic has affected your timeline, your production status, and your distribution goals. We take, as I'm sure you kind of gleaned from when we gave examples, the sort of ethical considerations of filmmaking very seriously. And obviously the COVID has radically changed our worlds, and also has impacted Black and Latinx and Indigenous, as well as like all working class people very specifically. And so we want to know how this might have impacted your timeline, impacted your production, not just that it's delayed, but how you might be rethinking and impacted the distribution, as we see that the industry is trying to adapt, and you're not sure sort of what environment you will be releasing the film in. So we're curious how you're using this as an opportunity to reach your community where they are. So any ideas you have, or how you're thinking about ways you're being innovative and ways you're being entrepreneurial and creative about getting your work completed, taking advantage of this time, or how you've been slowed down, we want to know, just so we can properly assess how we might support you over these 18 months. Okay. And I think that's it for the section we were going to kind of run through. So this is all the various ways you can follow us on social, and you should definitely be signed up for our newsletter if you're not. That's the best way to sort of be informed, but also social, because that's where you'll get all the hot tips on the Beyond Resilience conversations and everything else we're doing. And this email, doclab@firelightmedia.org, is where you should send any follow-up questions you might have, or stay connected to us. I think we will go now to the Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing.
I've been answering some of the Q&A questions by typing, ones that are really quick. Monica, do you want to tackle this one? From Jota, I was wondering, for the length requirement, does an hour refer to PBS accepting a total runtime of 53 minutes?
Yeah, Jota, I would say that, and excuse me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, I would say that would be acceptable, that if we say minimum an hour and you're looking for a broadcast hour, I would say that's acceptable, because yeah, your broadcasts, and the PBS actually would be 5640, but obviously it ranges. If you got on to Independent Lens or POV or other things, they've all got different lengths. So that would be the sort of exception below an hour. If it's the broadcast PBS hour, that's fine. Natalie Holly has, does the sample need to reflect our artistic vision for the film? I think we should both answer to this. I would say yes, it absolutely should. I mean, that's where it's always sort of, the treatment should kind of, oh, it disappeared a little quickly, Jimena, so if you could just hold them up while we're answering them. The treatment should give us the idea of the film and give us a sense of your visual language, but it can't substitute what actually is the visual language, which is the film and the sample itself. So that's actually going to be the best example of how you plan to tell the film and your sensibility, how you treat character, how you treat story, place, pacing. All of those things can come even through one strong clip that feels like, the best material that you have. Claire, I don't know what you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely correct. Like, we're really we don't just accept projects, we really accept directors and filmmakers, and what your language and viewpoint and perspective is going to contribute to the field. So we want to know how you are putting what is in your head into video. Film, again, is a visual language, so we want to see everything that you, the way you want to present it to us. I hope that answer helps. Go ahead.
Constantine's question is complicated. So Constantine, it looks like you're first or second generation, your family's from Greece, your co-director is Mexican-American. I mean, I would venture that your co-director is eligible. I mean, I think we would kind of qualify that any of the countries that are sort of European American, this is not necessarily what it's for, although you do identify as Middle Eastern. So I think that maybe you need to write us about, and also because this is a piece where, if you're applying as co-directors, you'd both have to be eligible, but maybe there's a world where your co-director is eligible. So I think you should probably send us a note. And
I'll follow up with that. We have had applicants that had a co-director, but it was not eligible, and so we weren't able to support them in the lab. If we had meetings where the co-director could participate, that was open to the public, then yes. But this experience is really for POC filmmakers specifically. We hope that you would, in participation, be able to translate that and share your experiences with your co-director. I would also say this question is really complicated, but we really are looking for filmmakers who understand the experience of being underrepresented in the United States and what that entails and brings up. And as we can all see is happening now, all of those issues are kind of coming to the forefront.
Hey Chen, does it hurt if my project still has no funds coming in except my own investment? So I'll say to that one, no, not necessarily. Certainly I can tell you from experience, having, worked on a film that was many years, my own like blood, sweat, and tears, and we respect sweat equity. So, there's many projects that even if they are well known now that went through the lab, that doesn't mean at the time that they entered the lab, they necessarily had all that industry support. So this may be the first vote of confidence or kind of affirmation from the industry, but as long as you're passionate about the project and you've demonstrated kind of a strong voice and access and a strong story, that's what's most important, not who's already attached. Your second question, does it hurt if I can only list some ideal crew? I would not list anyone that you've not actually like had a conversation with and they've, there's a good faith agreement that you'd work with them. I think that would kind of show transparency is important to us. That's what I'll say. So I don't think it's ethical to put someone on your application that, they're not aware that they're attached to your project. So better to leave them off unless there is that good faith agreement. Chloe, do you want to answer Megna's question?
Sure. Megna, so we do accept films that have previously been a short, but in your application, you really have to specify why this project deserves to become a feature. What you're going to be exploring further that will warrant it becoming a feature. Are there more characters? Is the issue wider than this and you were only able to focus on a really small piece? You really have to justify it in the application.
Raul, you have a great question on financial aid. We probably should have put that in there. Yes, actually, every member of the cohort gets a is that correct? $15,000 honorarium for their participation. So that is to use as you see fit. That can help offset the time that you'll invest in the lab. You can use that for whatever you want. You can use that to buy equipment. You can use that to go shoot. But that is a sort of flat amount that every fellow gets. And we're super excited that is a fairly recent, that we're able to provide that honorarium for all the participating fellows. So no, you don't need to include that amount in your proposal.
I'll jump in to also answer Karen H's question here. Over the 18 months, once you're accepted, you receive that $15,000 grant, as Monica just shared. People have used that to also pay themselves if they've done work on the film leading up to that time. Over the 18 months, you'll experience mentorship. So we assign you with a mentor. We offer you the first choice, and then we also try to see how they fit with your personality and the subject matter of your film. That person is usually a creative producer who can look at all of your funding materials, look at your sample, share notes. And then you'll also experience 3 professional development retreats. The first one starts with directorial vision. The next one is about finances and sustainability, and that's when we bring in industry to meet our fellows versus having our filmmakers chasing down funding, chasing down people's emails. We try to create an intimate experience where relationships are really being created. And then finally, distribution, impact, and engagement. As you're leaving the fellowship, we're trying to set you up to understand the very opaque world of distribution and impact and engagement, so that you're best set up to figure out where you want your film to go. I also meet with every fellow once a month to figure out, and what I do call mini producing, to figure out what they need, where they need to go, who they need to be connected to. And then finally, in addition to that question about financial aid, we provide stipends and we pay for all travel when it comes to retreats or any other event that we are supporting you for.
Thank you, Chloe. Amanda's question, does Firelight control any aspects of a film? No, you retain copyright. It's very important. You may have seen like earlier films that Stanley did get executive producer credits, but that was before the lab was really kind of formalized to how it is now. So those were sort of rare exceptions. So whereas, you know, you will be getting notes, you will be getting feedback, mostly from Chloe, Jimena, and myself. Occasionally, you know, Stanley has done master classes at and given feedback on your works in progress at some of the retreats. You always maintain editorial control and the copyright. So it's just that what we would ask is that, you know, you would include those Firelight logo, and you would know on the completed film and on the appropriate like website and other materials that you were supported by the Firelight Lab. So, but that's very typical of any other sort of funding or fellowship support that they ask for that. Hang Chen has a second question. This is a good question, Hang Chen. I want to take this opportunity to give a little bit more transparency about our review process. So you're right that it will go through a few rounds. The first round is internal with the artist programs team and also some working filmmakers that are part of the Firelight Films team, as well as alumni. So, you know, whereas it's a human process, we cannot control that they watch every minute of your sample. I think they all have enormous respect for how much work this is. So you can assume that just as if you were reviewing a project, you would watch it, they're gonna watch the entirety of your sample. With the exception if it's over 30 minutes, they're only expected to watch 30. So that first round gets sort of reviewed by one internal, one external reviewer who's an alumni. And then the kind of a smaller group of projects advance to be reviewed by our advisory board, and they recommend the slate of projects. The artist programs team actually selects the final group of projects because we're obviously looking for sort of like diversity in terms of region, gender, subject matter, stage. So, but we do have that sort of outside advisory board, and it's an incredible advisory board that's given us a lot of strong input and has championed projects. And then the sort of trailer, that's up to you. There's no, I don't think, limit on the trailer. Just if you've got 10 minutes, you know, you should just adjust. As Chloe said, it's important to have clips in addition to that. So I would make sure that there's at least, if it's a 5-minute trailer, make sure there's at least like, you know, 5 minutes of edited material we get to see beyond the trailer, because again, how you put a scene together is very different how you put a trailer together. Chloe, do you want to answer Suho's?
Sure. This is a good, yes, we do consider the story, synopsis, and treatment as the same. It should give us an idea of visually what we're going to be seeing in written form. Do you want to add something, Monica? I see you. Okay.
No, it's just my pet peeve that .cord doesn't call that the treatment.
Yeah.
It's annoying. It is the
True.
treatment, but it's not fair to filmmakers that it's not called that. But trust me, Suha,
Yeah.
every funder looks at that section as the treatment. So if you like not actually kind of utilize that section to like kind of tell the visual
Yeah.
story, you're hurting yourself in that, but it's not your fault.
Truly. Truly. And a lot of people make this mistake, is what I will say. They don't take advantage of giving us the full breadth of what the project will be, because you only have 10 minutes in your sample. I think of the treatment as a real opportunity to share much more than what we're going to be seeing, to kind of grip the reader and the reviewers as best as possible.
Claire, I'm going to answer your question, having previously been an employee of a PBS station. I'm going to say yine, yes and no, you're eligible. I would want to know that you actually own the rights to the material, because I know that when I worked for WGBH, I actually did not own anything that I worked on. Everything kind of was owned by WGBH. And you have to go through a pretty thorough process to ensure that you're allowed to do things independently. So all to say, you should just clarify that this is an independent production, and that they don't own the rights, only because we're really looking to support folks that sort of don't already have industry support. And so I guess if you, yeah, you just have to make a case, because I wonder, like, you know, you in theory, through being employed by a station, have access to support that an independent wouldn't have. So that would be a flag for me on your application. So you just have to be like very clear about that and the separation of church and state there. I don't know if you've seen that before, Chloe, if anyone's applied that's been employed.
No, this is a new one.
And I know there are exceptions that I think like Latino Public Broadcasting and Vision Maker will support. So maybe it's just because I've come more from the independent world, and so there was that kind of separation. But you know, I think that in the, I don't know if all of the alliance is that way, Claire. The Multicultural Alliance is like Latino Public Broadcasting, Center for Asian American Media, Black Public Media, etc. Like LPB and Vision Maker for sure. I'm not sure if the rest would support work. So all to say is there is other support for you. You just have to assess, is this right for you? Because I think, again, sorry, Brooklyn's very loud. We're looking to support independent producers. Chloe, do you want to?
The next three questions? Sure. The next three questions are kind of the same question, so I will answer. Please forgive me if I am butchering your name. Imistry, Alana, and Tracy. We, like most organizations, we've had to respond to Corona, especially with our retreats. The retreats, if we are not able to meet in person, will be virtual. We're actually in the process of hosting a 4-week virtual retreat for our outgoing cohort, which has had its challenges, but is actually going really well. We are making sure that everyone can be kept up to date and abreast as we're moving forward. The first retreat would be in February of 2021. So we are, you know, we're keeping an eye towards 2021 and seeing what might be possible by then. Did I answer? So if we aren't able to, we will figure out if we can do in-person events eventually. If we are, then yes, we take everyone to a specific location, either in New York, New Orleans, or California, and kind of all hunker down and hang out and get connected in those spaces.
And I'm gonna lift you up, Chloe. I'm gonna use your words that our priority is taking care of you, of taking care of our community. So we would not want to do anything to endanger your health or the health of our staff. So for February 2020, unless by some miracle we have the world's fastest vaccine, assume that first retreat would be online.
2021.
In 2021. So it's possible the second retreat could be in person, but until there is a vaccine, I do not anticipate we would be obligating filmmakers to travel across the country and be in closed rooms. But maybe we will look at how to do an outdoor retreat. Hey, Seba, nice to see you on here. Yeah, your answer is motivations to apply. We really want to know why you're applying to Firelight, what you would gain from this cohort. So yes, really reflecting and being honest with us about what are your motivations, either for your growth personally as a filmmaker, for this particular project, how it would benefit, or both. It could be both, of course, but we really want to sense here, because it is a very unique lab and community, you know, how you would fit. And I will say too, it's certainly not the first time, but something unique of this current cohort. We have folks like John Sestry Goff, and who's also the executive director of the Flaherty Institute. And we have Emily Cohen Ibanez, who is the coordinator for Brown Girls Doc Mafia. And, you know, it's very important to us in that cohort that we have these folks that have their individual creative work, but also have these roles in the industry and the community, and how they're actually helping build the field. And that is something I think, as we sort of hold our needs as individual creatives, but also the needs of the community, that I can see maybe being something we're looking for. So I'm only saying because I know that you've also worked in collectives, Sebastian, so, and that may be relevant to other folks, that, you know, how you juggle the sort of personal creative needs, and also, you know, how you support the broader film community is, that could be included in the motivations to apply. Which also reminds me of one thing I want to bring up from the COVID questions, something we piloted with this new cohort that is partly because they had the benefit of an in-person retreat for their very first retreat, but they will likely have all online retreats for the remainder of their time together. We started doing peer-to-peer mentors, which is a new thing we're piloting, but is pretty cool. And I would say that is something that COVID has affected, like retreats and our labs, that, you know, how do you foster those connections and those relationships when you don't have it in person? And that's so far seemed like a nice way that we've been able to help foster community because of COVID. Chloe, do you and Why Mystery has a second question that I think would be good for you to respond?
Sure. So we have many repeat applicants, and actually many of our repeat applicants have ended up in the fellowship. I would say that you should absolutely acknowledge how the project has changed. We do remember most repeat applications, and we really want to know not only how the project's changed, maybe how your viewpoint has changed, any other additional details that will really strengthen the support that your project might bring in.
I'm going to jump for time down to Natalie Hawley's question because we've got about 13 minutes left. So Natalie, recommendations for where we might get assistance in completing our applications, that you've been working on the film a long time but need mentorship and opportunities to shape the story without feedback. You don't know what you're doing wrong. It is true. It is difficult to get feedback, and I can tell you, having worked as a funder, having worked as a commissioning editor, it is really just a bandwidth issue. Often there is just not time to be able to offer everyone feedback, whereas, you know, and it's sort of the rare organization that is able to give feedback. So I would say if you've not been able to get feedback thus far and you're at a bit of a loss of sort of what's going wrong, I always think folks have resources they don't realize. So I'm assuming, since you're thinking of applying to Firelight, that you are a person of color. And I'm going to assume from your name, and forgive me for the assumptions, that you're a woman or maybe non-binary. So if you're a member of Brown Girls Doc Mafia, you know, that is a place where you could ask for input. If I'm sure there's other folks that are applying to the Firelight Lab, where you could maybe ask, like, could you share feedback on each other's applications? You know, I would sort of think, like, who is your community? You know, how, and, you know, you've got a bit of time. The deadline's not till the 29th, the 30th. Remind me.
29th.
The 29th. You've got some time. So, you know, a week in advance, 5 days in advance of the deadline, like share your proposal with someone else. Also, you know, and share that forward. Give them feedback. And, you know, again, like peer support is super important. So if you've not been getting it from sort of these sort of like outside external places, I think look within your own community and creators, and I think they'll be helpful. And hopefully you'll be helpful to someone else too. Sorry, I just wanted to jump up to that because that was a really, I believe a lot in peer mentorship, especially when there's not always mentors that look like us. There's so much to learn from like your peers.
I will add, and I just answered this in the Q&A chat, we offer informational calls right before we open the funding cycle of each year. And that's usually a time where if you reach out to us and you haven't, and you're not a part of the top 40 applicants that do receive feedback, you can ask and we can give very brief feedback and in addition to more information about Firelight.
So I'll go next to, I'm sorry, Daphne, we. Film is observational, the story arc will change. How to best lay that out? I mean, I think that you still should have a plan. So there still should be like a strong concept and vision for the film, even with a purely observational film, of how you imagine it, or even the various like ways that this film might play out based on the known knowns and the known unknowns. So maybe give us a little bit of insight into your process. What are the sort of like limitations you're imposing on yourself? And, you know, what does observational mean to you? I mean, are you deeply embedded? Are you like visiting periodically? How are you able to shoot right now because of the pandemic? Like you're, I'm sure, imposing like some restraints on this observation. Even just by doing an observational film, you're already imposing some restraints. So I think bring us a bit into your process and let us know like where you think or hope the film might go. You don't need to have all the answers because I'm sure some is going to be discovered through the process, but I think that will help us assess how we could be helpful to you through this. I wonder, maybe we could jump down to Jasmine's question, Chloe. And sorry that I'm jumping around. It's just I'm trying to, you know, the answers that seem most like applicable to a broad audience. Do you want to answer this one about biographical?
Yeah, we feel great about them. As we discussed, you know, we really pride ourselves in accepting a real breadth and variety of films. So if you have the rights, you have access to the story, you have access to whatever material you need to license, then yes, we are excited about biographical docs. Depending on how you're going to tell the story. It all comes down to how are you presenting the information? What is your vision? We want to be able to get to know you as a filmmaker and the themes and focus that you're interested in.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to Ceci's question. And Ceci, you're gonna forgive me. This is partly coming from like the school of hard knocks. But you know, when I was a first-time filmmaker and I didn't know how to write a budget, my mentor, Chris Hastings at the time, when I asked him the same question that you were asking, and I also was completely self-funded to that point, just dumped a book on my desk that was like how to budget a film that I think was a book he got in grad school from film school. And it was super helpful, actually like reading, and like it had like a paragraph for every line item and it had templates, but for me to actually understand like, oh, these are all just sort of like a roadmap and not every line item is applicable for every film. And some of these I have to do research because, you know, what the sound mix is going to be on a film that was like captured very well and is just going to need like a clean, straightforward sound mix versus one like mine that had sound that was like all over the place and all sort of, you know, media that was coming in. Like, you know, when you actually like show a sample to a post house, you show them basically like your most problematic material so they know what they got to work with. So all to say is that there are resources available I think IDA, their website, documentary.org, is really great in kind of laying out like resources for filmmakers. Again, I would look to some other like filmmaker collectives and kind of ask folks. I know like ITVS does a great budgeting workshop. Obviously that's just budgeting for a public media, so that's very specific, but it's a lot of good general knowledge that's not necessarily going to help you for this one because that's going to be in July. But I do think you've got some research to do, and again, it's a plan that sort of matches the intention of the film. It's totally fine if it's been self-funded to now, but if now you want to work on this full time, you kind of want to do it properly, well, like what does that look like? Because you could have a super low budget film to just complete it and get it out to market, or you could, you know, try to raise the money to pay yourself like a proper salary and do everything, and, you know, be paying everyone equitably.
And I would recommend, before, because we don't accept films in development, to start by applying for development funding. Once you've gone through that process, as Monica has shared it, I think that by starting at that place, you can really get an idea of how to push your project further, and get to funds or fellowships or wherever else that is, so that when you're further along, you're ready for that space. Hi, Crystal. So does your film need to have a social justice issue at its core? I would say no, but I will also say that the personal is political, and often for POC filmmakers, whatever you're documenting has political ramifications. How do I say this? Ripples out into the world. We are interested in films that have a clear vision, and a beautiful story that will attract specifically, all sorts of audiences, but we're really invested in serving POC audiences as well and centering them.
I laughed, Chloe, because I thought the exact same thing. The personal is political. So, but I would say too, we care about form and we care about artistry. And this is a conversation that happens a lot of like, who gets to sort of expand the form and experiment with form. And filmmakers of color are not always given that sort of space or freedom. And you'll see that many of our fellows and alumni actually are part of pushing that form. So, if you don't see that yours has an obvious social issue or is overtly political, but Chloe and I will probably find the political angle in it, we'd care just as much. Supporting the next generation of filmmakers of color means supporting them in all forms and their freedom and ability to tell the stories they want to tell. So, if yours is coming from a completely and pure artistic and form pushing sensibility, we're here for that, And I think, again, if you look at kind of the body of films there's many films that have been supported that are those boundary pushing films.
Yeah, I will just finally add, that is a really amazing point that Monica just made. That is the second thing you should take away if you remembered nothing else from this webinar. Jatavia Gary, who is an experimental filmmaker and one of our alum who works in the gallery space, it is, I think, a really great example of that. She's exploring a film about her family and intergenerational trauma, which on the face of it is not immediately political, but I'm sure that if we really dove deep and thought more, there's hundreds of threads that come social issue.
Yeah, or I think of like in the current cohort, how we have 3 filmmakers making personal films that have completely different approaches to the personal film. Jasmine, sorry, it's so hot, I'm blanking on her last name. Jasmine Lopez's project, John Sestry Goff's again, and Colleen Thurston's, all, really range between traditional and experimental, and in terms of the material that they're using and how they're using their voice. So one example, and that sort of like elves, I think, really pushing form in all of those in different ways. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, and we're at time, I think.
There was one quick question about age. Age does not disqualify you as an applicant. Someone wrote that they were 65 years young.
Oh, and I see a last question. Dan, you got to come in with the tough question at the end. How should you approach the topic if there's not an apparent social issue? Well, that's a hard question, and that's very broad how you said it. I mean, I think specifically with your film, a topic still has value. It doesn't necessarily have to fall into the social issues bucket. I'm sure it still falls into some sort of humanities bucket. So if you sort of think of like, okay, if I stepped back and thought like, where thematically does this fit in terms of like the humanities, or how would like other folks talk about this film, and sort of like, that may help you kind of think of like, what are other topics that the film explores. And, you know, we need films by filmmakers of color kind of representing the whole range of human experiences and histories and stories. So, you know, your topic doesn't have to be social issue. It doesn't have to, but give us a sense of what are the topics that are covered.
Yeah, I mean, hi, Dan. I would also add, you know, for your film and specifically, you're looking at LGBTQ issues, issues of visibility versus invisibility, issues of fatherhood and connecting. All of those things are topic summaries and issues that can be placed within that space.
I hope you wrote that all down. She just gave you the bullets for you to expand on in your application. Okay, we see that you did not, you were putting them in the chat. So we'll look at these really quick, and then we've got to wrap up because we've got a retreat to get to online. So does it help you get access to post-production, and does it cover guidance? So I will say, just to cover them both, yes. We also, Chloe mentioned, have a retreat that is specifically about distribution and impact. So, and that's actually the retreat that we're in the midst of right now. So we're going to very much, and you know, Chloe and I had to redesign that retreat first for the pandemic and then for the rebellion. So we're looking at what distribution and impact looks like as the industry and the country is, you know, undergoing like hard reckonings and reflections and changes. So yes, you will get guidance for that, as well as with festivals. That's kind of covered. In terms of post, you know, I would say that that's where, if you're looking for those kind of specific, like, yes, we give recommendations and can help kind of, we don't necessarily like match make directly, but we certainly, once we get to know you and your project, can start to give you some referrals, and your cohort, I'm sure, will have ideas, and your mentor will probably be able to give you some of that input as well. And, you know, in terms of those sort of specific needing to hire various folks for the post and the online, I think that that is something you either would get from us, from Stanley, or from your cohort. Again, you have resources beyond what you think you have. You'd be surprised like who in your circle actually can give some of this advice.
And the last thing I'll say is that we have a really amazing, I mean, one of the biggest things about the fellowship is the amazing community of alumni that we have. We have a listserv where filmmakers can send out any question they need or want or desire to the listserv, and people will respond and provide recommendations. We also have a whole crew list that is only open to Firelight alumni that are POC crew working in the field. Odua, you should reach out to us because it seems like you have a few more questions that we should talk about a little bit more. If you are based in both places, yes, but you must have a residency in the United States. And citizen, yeah.
Reach out. Chloe will give you 20 minutes before the deadline.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Those were great questions, and really nice to see some familiar faces. Naisha, why'd you wait so long? Yes, 75% shot is totally fine. Just let us know what your plans are for that remaining 25. Okay. I'm just teasing you. Don't take it too personally. Just let us know what your plans are. You know, the benefit right now of being majority shot is that gives you a lot of time to spend with the material and to be very thoughtful when it is safe to shoot again and when it's appropriate. So it actually, you know, there's the benefit of time right now. So just let us know how you're thinking about how you would complete the film given this new reality. Thank you all for attending. It really was incredible to see how many folks tuned in. We hope this was helpful. Please email us if you have any follow-up questions. Maybe Jimena can throw that email up in the chat again. Please be thoughtful if you do ask Chloe for her time, because we are nearing the week before the application. So make sure there's not something that's not, you know, answered in the website. But if something that hasn't been answered in this webinar or answered in the website, like our friend who's stationed in West Africa, you've earned that time, then please ask for it, but just be mindful. And thanks again. I think, will we be sharing the link to the recording? That's a good question. Maybe, yes, we will. So look for that to get posted online so everyone can see me in this hot Brooklyn day. Thank you all. Be well. Take care of yourselves. Good luck on your applications, and help each other.
Help each other. Yes. Bye, everyone.